With a question from Nick Holliday, who's a board member of the National Association for Airways.
Thank you. Can you hear the... Fine. As well as being a member of the association, I've got a foot in both camps, which I think is quite good for the protected areas, being vice chair down at Exmoor National Park, but also on the Cotswolds Conservation Board. I just wanted to pick up a theme from the earlier speakers before the Minister arrived, and that's very much about the squeeze on the A and Bs themselves, and particularly those who might be most vulnerable in the family. As we know, A and Bs national parks are the same status in law with regards to landscape value. I think there's no current danger, and I use that word quite carefully, no current danger in any of the national park authorities failing. But I think there is a very real danger of some of the, let's call them the less strong members of the A and B family going to the wall, quite simply. I'd be very interested to hear what the panel think about what should be done to prevent that happening. And if I may add the wider, but if it does happen, what should we do about it?
Steve?
Well, is it on?
Oh yes.
I could be very trite and just say give them more money. It's all a question of priorities, isn't it? And I think this is the difficulty we've got. It's a national designation, it's nationally important, but they're vulnerable to local circumstances. And it's very sad if the politicians who control the budgets feel that it's not worth the candle and it's allowed to fall below a critical mass. If it's a question of money, it sounds like it is, these are difficult times. As I said earlier, there is money about. We're a rich country. The money can be found. I suppose it's a question of convincing the right people. I was talking to somebody earlier on, and maybe the sad part is to really wake everybody up. Somebody has got to fail. That'd be rather sad if we get to that, but I suspect we're not far away from it. Perhaps the Minister will take that message away. Don't allow any to fail because the ramifications are national, not local. What should we do if they do go to the wall? I don't know, go and talk to the Minister.
With that in mind, with that in mind, Minister?
Thank you, Chris, and thanks, Nick, for your question. Well, as I think I said in my speech, I acknowledge that you live in straitened times, and I hope you understand that we live in pretty straitened times too, and we have to, we do have to prioritise, and it's a really difficult job. But having said that, I do think that A and Bs are really important. We're working on the Land Use Consultants report, which has come up with some interesting ideas, and some of you kindly attended a recent session where we looked in depth at the economic case for protected landscapes. And that some work is still going on, and we need to make that swept up case. I think we have to look for all opportunities for funding actually nowadays. I mean, we have to look at the private sector, we have to look at lottery funding, I think we have to look at the health sector, I think we have to look to the LEPs, and that's why I want this work done to prepare a really good case. And I know you've been talking about brands as well, which I think is really important as well. I think I have to ask you to use the local democratic process on local authorities, because that's a key part of your funding, I know. And come and talk to me. My door is always open.
Thank you, Minister. Nick mentioned national parks as well as A&Bs, David. He said no national parks were looking like they were likely to fail soon, but potentially some A&Bs might. Can I see what you think about it?
Yes. I suppose I should thank Steve for being kind enough not to mention the elephant in the room that he mentioned during his speech there, or at least not in such explicit terms. A couple of things on this from me, really. One is that ultimately I'm employed by the Yorkshire Dales National Park Authority. So if it became a bun fight between national park authorities for funding, as it sometimes does, I'm employed by the Yorkshire Dales National Park Authority. If it becomes a bun fight in terms of the wider protected area movement, ultimately I'm employed by the Yorkshire Dales National Park Authority and will do whatever it takes to ensure that that organisation gets the resources it needs. I have to say that in all the years that I've been involved in the environmental conservation movement, one of the sadnesses is the inability of that movement to speak with one voice in a way that sometimes the economic interest can manage to speak with one voice. And often we kind of turn in on ourselves, and I suppose when you've got great financial pressures, the temptation to do that is greater than ever. However, for me, there's really no value in fighting over the scraps that are falling from the table. We can do that, and I'll drop back into my silo of working for the Yorkshire Dales National Park Authority, and you'll drop into yours, and we'll have that bonfire. It's surely got to be about persuading ministers, government about the value that protected area families bring to the country, and more importantly than government, if they're not listening, persuading the public of the value that protected areas bring to the country. In some of the terms that Steve talked about, the spiritual, the cultural, but some of the strong economic terms as well, because in many areas the economies of those areas are the protected areas and what they bring to it. On a more practical level, I picked up on some of those in my speech, and the ministers touched on some of them. I think there are more opportunities for joint working, and we need to get out of any silos that exist more than we've ever done before. I know that both Howard and Paul Amblin from National Parks England are constantly banging on about that theme, and I do believe that's getting a lot of traction. More collaboration, more assistance at a practical level between national park authorities and AONBs in their locality, and certainly more speaking with one voice to bodies like LEPS, as I was indicating and illustrating in my speech. That's got to be a way forward. We know that the message is a strong one. It's a case really of having it listened to both within government and within the wider public.
Thank you. Matt, while we're down that end? If you don't feel you have things to add, you don't necessarily have to.
When have I ever been short of word? Okay, a sort of straightforward sort of business response might be if a unit is going to fail, it's going to fail, and something else will come along and replace it. I think that is a reality in some cases. Obviously, the designation doesn't fail; it's the ability to drive the unit behind it that fails. There is some quite interesting work that I've been made aware of going on in Suffolk about merging units to get some greater economies of scale. Learning from our MOD client, I would look at an outflanking manoeuvre to see whether or not you can work around the problem. And what I was trying to get at in my speech about relationships with business is that it's not about going to business and asking for sponsorship, it's about going to business with an offer to help them solve some of those big problems that business is trying to solve around natural capital and ecosystem services. What does real sustainability mean? How do these businesses do good business by doing good things? And I think that's a very compelling offer. And your agility and your relative small size and your extremely high value proposition makes you a very attractive candidate for that. And you are thought leaders. And that's very exciting for us. So I think if you bring all those things together, there is no reason why failure should be a realistic prospect. But if it does happen, then learn from it. Because in some cases there is nothing wrong with it.
Let's just come to Howard and then we'll come out to you. I'm sure you've all got something to say about that.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm going to respond in a couple of layers really. I think that we all know that the A&B model is a wonderfully efficient business model. We know that, looking from the inside. I think we fail in some ways to fully articulate what it is we produce, what our offer is to the market, and that is something we need to tighten up. So I think there is a lot of messaging that needs to take place there. Just to go back to Nick's initial point, if an A&B unit goes to the wall, it will be an absolute tragedy for a collective, for a family. Not just on a symbolic level, but also because we work well collectively. We use a lot of information, we use a lot of learning, we pull a lot of good practice from all of our members to improve the greater good. So we would lose something fundamental from the network. David mentioned that he's working for a national park authority, and likewise I'm employed by a national association that is driven by its membership. I think it would be wrong of me not to fully reflect the feeling of injustice that there is out there in the AOB world over the current funding arrangements. Now, I'm reflecting it, I do reflect it, I reflect it regularly, but I also agree with David that this is not the time to scrabble over a shrinking pot of money. That isn't going to get us anywhere. If we can use that shrinking pot of money more effectively to move the movement forward over to achieve common objectives, then I think that's sensible, and that can be built around collaboration. We're working closely with National Parks England, as we do with National Parks Wales. We do the same in Wales. So let's look at moving things forward, I think, collaboratively to pursue a collective agenda where we can. I think, finally, what I will say is we talk about collaboration with the parks. We work very well with the parks. We've got a lot of friends in the parks. We learn a lot from the parks can learn a lot from us. And I think there's a lot of harvestable value there. If we enter into collaboration, we are a progressive movement. We do take things forward. We're doing some wonderfully progressive things in order to push environmental management further forward. If we do enter into collaboration, it should be collaboration based on these shared objectives. It shouldn't be collaboration based on necessity. And at the moment, we are considering how we collaborate with others based on necessity. And that's not actually, for me, the right reason to do it. So let's go back. Let's look at the platform from which we're springing, which is a platform of equality. In order to do that effectively, we need people to advocate on our behalf. And we need them to advocate from organisations that might not necessarily have done it in the past. So we need the CLA on board, we need the NFU on board, we need business on board. And in many ways, that will only be developed through activity at the local level and activity at the national level. So there's a challenge there to the membership to work with us to actually work up that advocacy. We need people to speak on our behalf. So thank you.
So has anybody got anyone in the audience anything to comment on there?
I had a question about what happens if an AOMB unit goes to the wall, and you've got no comments at all. It's fascinating. I'm quite happy to move on if you haven't. You've had some very comprehensive answers. Question from Helen Hamilton from the North Pennines.
Thanks. What does the panel think is the unique selling point for the AOMBs?
It's appropriate to go to Matt first, I think. What we do.
Can I just reverse my previous speech? I think the USP is this: that you are small, you are agile, you are very closely connected to your community. That you have this astonishing power to convene. You know, I could go on about that for an hour. Your ability to convene is what is most exciting about the AOB community and family. It's what makes you very exciting to potential business partners. It should be making very exciting for local, national and European politicians. Your ability to get people in the room and have an honest conversation is very rare. And I think, personally, if I had to pick on one thing, it would be that power to convene.
David, while we're down there, if you want to... Got any thoughts about the unity of AOMB? Well, you can do it comedically if you wish, but...
I haven't a clue. I haven't a clue what the USPs of AOMBs, and as Chief Executive within one of the protected areas, you'd expect me to, wouldn't you? I mean, the fact I don't know should, in a sense, tell you something about the difficulties you might have in selling the USP to the general public. I know the USP is in national parks because other people have told us it's that brand called national parks which conjures up an image in people's minds. It's why we're desperate to keep hold of that tag of national parks, in spite of the fact that the International Union for the Conservation of Nature doesn't think that British national parks are worthy of the name and should call them something else because they don't do enough for the natural environment. That's an interesting debate, we won't go on that one. But it shows the difficulties we've got there. But when you talk to the public, when you talk to business and sponsors, they think they know what national parks are. Somebody with the National Trust is now. They think they know what that is, and that is really very useful. It's why it captures people's hearts, and it's why it captures people's minds, and it's why we have so much support from the public, and it's why when things get quite difficult, as they have recently, for example, over some of the planning proposals, that the public get that. They can relate to those articles that they're reading in newspapers or seeing on television. With AONBs, I just think that's really tricky, and the term AONB, oh dear, please. Sorry, is that all right?
It's not my role to tell you whether your answers are any good or not. There's no board. Excellent. Howard.
Thank you. Obviously, we have no idea what each other are going to say here. I'm interested in Matt's points. He had 5 USPs. I don't know whether that's actually possible to have 5 unique selling points, but I think that's great. What I will say is that yes, we are areas of outstanding natural beauty, and I think it's a really, really good name. It is a good name because we are areas of outstanding natural beauty, and if we can't get a message over using that name given to us, then I don't know how we're going to do it. Yes, I think we're trusted. We're trusted at the local level like nothing else. The report we had commissioned through Land Use Consultants, an independent report, came up as that's the single most important thing that we brought to the table. We didn't expect that to come up. We hadn't even considered it. We'd overlooked it because we take it for granted. We're trusted. We can act as honest brokers and we can engage people. And we're also fleet of foot. We can change. We have been changing over the last 5 years, particularly in order to adapt to changing circumstances. We're very quick off the mark. So in line with Matt's numerous USPs, I've given you a few more there. Thank you.
This is something which, as several of you know, I've been giving quite a lot of thought to, and that's why we've had the Land Use Consultants report, and that's why I convened the gathering recently to work on it. I think it is legitimate to have more than one. I think, in fact, there are probably USPs for different audiences as well. I think there are economic USPs for businesses. I think there are health USPs. I think there are biodiversity USPs. I think there are education USPs. I've got a head full of ideas: healthier workforce, inward investment, proximity to urban areas, cutting-edge farming, tourism and other businesses. I think with your help, what I really am keen to do is to work this into a really compelling case. I think it's a very important question for all of us.
Thank you. And Steve.
I'm a simple soul, as you know. I get worried. I think the selling point of A&Bs is the reason why people like special places. It's not about the designation, it's about the place. Nobody goes to an A&B because it's an A&B, and I certainly don't go to a national park because it's a national park. I go because it's a nice place, it's where I want to spend my time. I think it says a lot when people use their spare time, their spare cash to go to these special places. There's something that appeals to them, it's elemental. I think we get too hung up on the designation, what it means, and all the criteria and science behind it. These are just special places. A lot of the special places are not designated at all. I think we ought to just go back to basics. What is it that appeals to the British psyche that makes us go where we do, spend our time and our money, and use that to sell it? I'm sure if we had a customer focus group, they're not out of fashion these days, they'd say, what appeals to you? And they'd talk about flavour, wouldn't they, or appearance. They wouldn't worry about the wrapping or what the label looks like. I think we need to cut through some of this crap, to be honest. It's because I've had a distraction and we lose sight of what it is we're trying to do in the first place. Sorry for that.
No, it's that collection of 3 things that makes them interesting on these occasions: intelligent, articulate, and quite close to retirement. So, David wants to come back.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to take issue with some of Howard's points there about the strength of that association of outstanding natural beauty, AONB brand. Because I've got to be honest, I still don't get that, Howard. But Steve actually came up with what I thought was the answer. It is about a sense of place rather than the designation itself. And I was reminded of that because 2.5 years ago I was sat in the kitchen of a guy called Gary Verity, some of you might know this guy. He's been in the press quite recently because he brought a bike ride to Yorkshire. And when I was sat in his kitchen, he was saying to me, I've got this really good idea about bringing a bike ride to Yorkshire. Sorry, I've got a cyclist in the room. Right, we've got quite a few. I'm not an Uber cyclist. And I said, well, what are you talking about? I said, well, I'm going to bring the Tour de France to Yorkshire. And I said, Tour of France. Even with my elementary French, I got it. I said, but it's a French. No. They have a grande pie, he said, and it goes from different countries, and it's really quite there. Look at that banner. Just lift that banner up. Sorry, and he said distraction. And he said it goes from different countries, and you wouldn't believe the value of this marketing exercise and what it can bring to the economy. So I'm going to bring it to Yorkshire and trot off. Because it was a biggie. And he said, I want you to help me. And I said, well, what's this got to do with the Yorkshire Dales National Park? And he said, it's got to do with the fact that you are the Yorkshire Dales National Park, and we think that that's a real attractor to getting the organisers, the ASO, to come to this area. So I spent 6 months in a helicopter and in a Land Rover showing the organisers the Yorkshire Dales National Park. And when we finished that marketing exercise, Christine Prudhomme, the head of the ASO, said there's some real problems with these roads because they don't meet a lot of the criteria that we've got in terms of the cycle race. He said, but my God, what a landscape. I have never seen anything like this. We're bringing the tour here, whether the roads are fit for purpose or not. And I thought, fantastic. And Gary was making the point that that's done because of the sense of place. Yorkshire Dales and the way that Steve was describing. So maybe it is about places and not designation. Any A&B that wants to bid for that, incidentally, next time, I'm quite happy to give some consultancy advice on what's required, and very, very cheaply as well.
But we can't afford the helicopters.
I'm sure it was supplied by the organisers.
Get it from business.
So rather than getting into a scrap about who can and who cannot afford helicopters, I'm not going to put this one out to the audience. I'm going to go to the next question, a question close to my heart, from Phil Holden.
Thank you. Despite several decades of agri-environment schemes, much of our wildlife is still in decline. What can we do about this?
David, I know you just spoken, but I'm going to come back to you. What do you think you can do about it? What are you personally with the helicopter?
Ours is the Yorkshire Dales have just produced a report showing that against a whole range of species, animal and flora and fauna, that we're booking the national trend. That suggests to me that having a designation and working alongside farmers and landowners and other interested bodies, let's call them, that something can be done to reverse some of those trends. So I don't think that is doom and gloom. I think what we have as a role within the protected area families, when the debates are taking place about how agri-environment fits into the funding of agriculture and upland management, that we have a role there to represent those wider communities, to ensure that the conservation benefits are recognised, not only in terms of what they bring to the public through the development of ecosystem services, another terrible phrase, but through that development, but also in terms of them having a really concrete result in terms of the way that farmers and landowners are funded to manage that landscape. So, not doom and gloom, designation helps. We have a role there to lobby and facilitate on behalf of those communities for which we represent.
Matt?
Okay. So the MODSA, as I say, it's about 1.5% of the UK. We are a very big recipient of agri-environment. We're also a very big custodian of SPAs, SOCs and SSSR. We have a very challenging target with Biodiversity 2020, and the only way we are going to meet it is through the effective use of the agri-environment programmes, because the money that we spend on behalf of our client is government money, it's your money. Virtually all of the estate is under some form of agriculture. The only bits that we don't actually have licences or tenants on are the impact areas, for obvious reasons. heavy artillery and sheep don't mix. Well, anyway. But they do mix extraordinarily well. So yes, we are now working very hard to make sure that the 2020 target's met. We met the last target to get 95% in recovering or favourable condition. We now got another target to meet, and we will do that. It's within the life of our contract, so it focuses our mind significantly. And without every environment, we couldn't do it. So whilst some will say it's going backwards, and there may be very good data sets going backwards, we are meeting the targets that we are set. And that's the one thing I can say about the Ministry of Defence, is that when you give them a target, they work really hard to meet it. And what they do is they pass it down to their supply chain, us, to meet it for them. So that's kind of at the top of my list of things to do. So yeah, thank you very much, Adrian.
I'm not sure I have an answer to this. I've not equated to my own garden. I think in my garden I try jolly hard to be a wildlife friendly gardener. I see fewer butterflies and fewer hedgehogs and fewer song turtles. I think it's a case of there are lots of people trying very hard, but you all need to try very hard. I mean, the severance or fragmentation, then we all take a step backwards. That's a part answer. I have no idea why it doesn't bring more results than it does. It seems to me that other forces at work we didn't yet fully understand. But it's a case, I think, of the precautionary principle, and if we don't try everything we can, we're going backwards even faster. That's not to say there aren't a huge number of great success stories. I think it is a case of some trends are not what we wish them to be and deeply worrying, but there are a lot of high spots and we know how to resolve some of the problems. So it's keep at it and think big, I think is the answer.
Before we come to Howard and the Minister, perhaps anybody in the audience has got a view on this? Any thoughts on this?
I've got one.
Phil, that's handy.
I think there are some issues about the kind of options that are taken up and how much freedom is given to applicants about what options they take up. We have an example, without going into the detail, in our area of what could well become the first SAC in the UK to fail, a river with an important species in. Many agri-environment agreements in that catchment have been taken up without doing the good things on the river that would have helped that species. That doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense.
Anybody else? Elaine?
Thank you very much. What I would say to David is something very famous once said, no man is an island entire of himself. And Yorkshire Dales may well be an example of success. What did you do that was so great that meant that the rest of us could learn from that experience, and how are you sharing that experience? Because it's absolutely vital that we actually do work together, because Biodiversity 2020 isn't your target, it's all of our targets, and it's probably the most challenging target we've been offered. We failed 2010, 2020 is just as difficult. There are good stories out there, but there is so much more work to do.
Before we get any thoughts from David, I will go to the other panellists. I would say that in terms of those targets, and something Matt said, if by meeting those targets we mean what actually happened, which was getting land holdings into an agri-environment scheme suddenly meant that met the target, then that's not conserving and enhancing biodiversity, that's ticking a box. And that's all that happened. So don't be fooled that we met those targets. Nationally, we did not. Any more? I'll come this way.
Thanks, Chris. So the original question was, despite the agri-environment schemes, why are things still going downhill? And I am rapidly learning that biodiversity is an extremely complex thing. Species are affected by weather, by disease, by climate change, by farming techniques, by pesticides, by other human impact, by the balance of nature. One creature eats another. So what do we do about that? Well, I think you have an important role, as has been said. I think also, we are learning all the time. So the new environmental land management scheme, which is being designed under the new CAP, is going to be much more tailored. So specifically the very rare and precious creatures in the river, we will not let schemes be written that don't protect them. That should be the way we go, and we have to be very tailored to individual places and species. I think we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that there is some good news. People have spoken about some good news. I mean, actually, the story on butterflies last year was good, primarily because of weather, but nonetheless, it was good, and there are others. We're learning all the time, and I think you do have, as I say, a crucial role to play. Specifically, we will shortly be announcing our call to action on our national pollinator strategy, and obviously pollinators are at a point in the food chain as well as providing pollinator services. So there are a whole range of tools like that are important to this.
Any thoughts on this, Howard?
Thank you, Chris. I think most of the things have been said, but I'll add those, but not by everybody, no. I have a particular passion for black grouse in my spare time, and I'm pretty familiar with the hill near us in North Wales, and I'm aware of how much money has gone into conserving and enhancing that heather moorland for the sake of black grouse. And every year I go up and I count 5 males, and no matter how hard they try, that population is not increasing. And I think in some cases we have to work on the basis that populations are so small now in some areas for some species that we've got to try a different approach. No amount of habitat restoration will encourage those grouse to move back into that area unless there are populations nearby. So that is an anecdotal view on the subject. I think more seriously, there hasn't been enough take-up of some of the options, the agri-environment options that are needed to move things forward, for whatever reasons. I think the point that was made earlier about the national park is a good one, because I think in order to move the biodiversity debate forward in any meaningful way, we have to work at a landscape scale. We've been saying it for ages. The national parks and the AONBs provide a really good integrated approach to land management that will allow that to happen. If we can ensure that it does, it's there. If we can ensure we can take it forward successfully. I think the new environmental land management schemes, the agri-environment schemes, will be interesting, working at a landscape scale, taking things slightly differently. So I think we need to watch that. We've obviously got a lot going on around NIAs and that we need to watch. But what I'll end on is saying that it's really worth looking at what's happening in Wales. Welsh Government, with NRW, are looking closely at natural resource planning on a landscape scale, where an integrated approach to land management will be the central focus of all delivery. And I think we may well learn something. We may well learn that it's not the right approach, but we will probably get something very good out of it. And I think that's worth watching.
We'll just pick up on what Elaine said and come back briefly to David. I'm really proud of our collaboration with David, and the day as well. Actually, Richard, I'll just come to you first. Richard Lee from the Labour District.
Thank you. I had the privilege of sitting on the Lawton Committee a couple of years ago, and it came to a very snappy conclusion that what we need to do to arrest the decline in biodiversity when it comes to wildlife sites is have more of them, bigger ones, better ones, as in their quality, and join them up. And the protected landscapes have a great role to play in relation to making sure the agri-environment stuff is targeted in our areas at what makes them special. The joined up bit, connecting up the dots, and what's the other one I was going to say? Making them more joined up, making them bigger, and we can't do more of them. Otherwise, we can do everything else in there. And I think it's really important that the government tries to keep the NIA initiative, which aims at that more bit, going, because a lot of the NIAs fall across protected landscapes, and it's provided a great kind of focus for us in concentrating on biodiversity. So I'd encourage the Minister to do anything he can to keep that particular train rolling.
Thank you. It's certainly been a massive success in Ansett and Silverdale. As those that went the other day will testify. I can see lots of people nodding in the audience. David, quickly, do you want to come back on Elaine's question?
Very quick. Well, on the fundamental, this point about sharing experience, whether it's good or bad, and sharing the bad is as helpful as sharing the good, to be quite frank, because you can learn quite a bit from those. I'd absolutely agree with that point. When I use the word we, I didn't mean the people I'm employed by, the Occidentals National Park Authority, because the issue we're talking about doesn't respect boundaries in that sense. You know, they go up to the National Park boundary and say, oh, we'll stay here, but we're not popping over there, unless it's a hen harrier in the Forest of Bowland. It was wider than the Dales boundary. It is partly about getting land into agri-environment schemes, but only, as Chris was saying, if it enables better habitat management, and that's what I was talking about, through joint working. So ventures like the Peak Partnership Project, you know, I think there are issues there that where the learning should actually be shared more widely. I was interested in Howard's talk about black grouse, because it's not you know, success right across the board. Yeah, I look at an environment in a habitat like the Orchard Dales and I think, that is ideal habitat, the hen harrier, the raptor. We haven't got any. Why is that? I was hoping to have a word with the Minister about that actually before he left, to see if we could try to push that agenda forward, because I think that's becoming an increasing issue for us, both in conservation terms and politically, and we need to grab those options we've got for improving that situation.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, we're going to come to another question.
We're very keen to have panel questions so that they're relevant to everybody, but I think this one is, I think it has to be said, very much aimed at you. From Rose Day, and we'll have a response from the Minister and then we'll throw it out to the audience.
Thank you. I'm Rose Day of the North Devon Coast AONB. I'm a National Association board member. I'm the former chairman of our AONB and now vice chairman. Mention has already been made of the role of local authorities in funding AONBs. So the question is, can DEFRA provide an assurance that local authorities are in no doubt that they are expected to support AONB partnerships through the established funding arrangement?
Thank you. Well, we did touch on that in the first question. As you, I think, know, I have done my level best to protect, so far as I possibly can, the funding that comes from central government. The funding that comes from local authorities has to be the responsibility of local authorities, and they answer to their public. Having said that, I do have regular contact with Nick Bowles, and I certainly make your case. But there is no substitute for you using the local democratic process to keep making your case, and I know that you do. And as we've also discussed, all of us are looking for alternative sources as well. And I have said, please come and talk to me. My door is always open.
You know, occasionally, David Dimbleby just says, I'm going to ask you a question. I'm going to ask you a question. Do you not think there's a really strong leadership role for DEFRA actually in this, to say to the local authorities, we believe in this and we would really very much passionately like you to get behind this, because one of the things that local authorities have done in recent years is the lead they have taken in some cases is to cut their funding in line with DEFRA's, and that's not been particularly helpful. So I know you're talking to other departments and trying to encourage them. Is that the kind of leadership you're wanting to show for us?
I mean, it is a difficult thing because they are answerable to their local publics. They have their own budgets, and well, as I say, they have to answer to them. But you are part of that local public. What I have done is I have shown the way by setting our budget, and my way of exerting influence on them is through my ministerial colleague who's responsible for local authorities.
I'm going to come out to the audience. Anybody? I've got one. I'll come back to you. I've got one in the corner.
Yes, thank you. Got the opportunity to come to this conference. It's been really super, great. But I'll get on with what I'm trying to say. There's one word I'd like to say that I've never been able to say in all the years that I've been in public life, if you like, as a local councillor, and that's my lord, ladies and gentlemen. That's first. Let me get to the point.
Sorry, I thought that was it.
Yeah, well, if you listen to the public, then you know what we think. That's the best way to work. I come from the Wye Valley, I'm chairman of the AONB and I'm a local councillor, and as I said before, chairman of planning. I went to see Nick Bowles a few weeks ago about the MPPF. We want to see where we are with it. And someone said to me there that, well, the best thing for you to do is, we know that Nick Bowles' sister lives very near to the AONB in Herefordshire. I said, well, we'll talk to Nick Bowles' sister, because I think that's probably the best way to get through to Nick. But so what we're doing, we're talking to our local people to try to find what they want. So, we did a scheme, not very long ago, a river festival from Hereford to Chepstow. And we got 150,000 from somewhere. But the point I'm making is, because of that, we got 20,000 people to participate and come and look at that, what we were doing. That's 20,000. Get a tenner each off them and your budget's not too bad. So if you, and a comment I wanted to make about our first speaker, and I forget the names of all the people, all these important people, but they don't provide the money. And you were sort of, in a way, the gentleman on the end, criticising, hope there wasn't a councillor in the audience, but I am that councillor, and we are the people that provide money to the AONB. And there's some others that do. And we support it. I've supported it for many years, and we support it. So don't keep knocking the councillors and everybody that are the funders, because they're the ones, they pay your wages. So I think the point is, and we do support it passionately in the Wye Valley. It's one of the most wonderful places you could want to visit and live, so please come there, because we need your money. So let's get positive for a change, shall we? And let's see if we can work with, I work with 4, and you don't need to stop me yet, because I'm going to do this. That's what I do.
Dankeschön.
Yeah, right. I'm sorry about the Germans, but there you go. Because I was only there on Twinning the other week, and that's part of a partnership. So what we do is we work with 4 local authorities, and those local authorities are very keen to give the money. And as our guest speaker said, we need to go out there and make sure those local authorities do it. So please, let's get down on the ground level a little bit and see what we can do with our local people. They will support you if you give them something to support. Thank you.
Do you want to come back on that?
I don't think it was me, was it?
Yeah, I hate to say this, mate, but I think it was.
No, I think it was. Yeah, I don't think I was talking about local councillors, because local authorities don't give anything to national park authorities. No funding at all. Although they do give us 16 members out of 22 on our board for nothing. Our funding all comes direct from DEFRA. That was a changed arrangement that came in about 2003 from memory, because we used to get a quote from local authorities, but it was a load of nonsense, because the government give the grant to local authorities to give to the national park authorities. Well, that's not very transparent, is it? So it now comes direct from DEFRA. So I don't think I was criticising local councils in that sense, though. If I had a lot longer, I could have criticised them.
No, she wasn't. That's a view I share. Linda.
Linda Bennett from Blackdown Hills AONB. I have a small amount of Somerset in my AONB, and I think people know the county that we're talking about. Somerset is considering reducing the budget to the 4 AONBs by 90%. We all expected a reasonable cut. We were working to that. We didn't think 90% was reasonable. I think I would just like to ask the Wye Valley how they managed to do it. We have tried so hard to keep them on board, and it is the other local authorities who are trying to and working with us, and they're saying, why should we subsidise a county? You know, we are suffering cuts as well, and it is the domino effect that we can't stop. And I turn now my question to Lord Morley, because as David said about national parks, you gave the national parks full funding. If you see AONBs going to the wall, would you consider giving them the full funding so we continue doing the wonderful work that we've been talking about?
Rather than repeat what I said before, That sounds like come and see me.
I will.
Not in the sort of headmaster's office sense, obviously. Peter Stevens wants to ask a question.
Thank you, Chris. Peter Stevens, Devon Vale, AONB, elected councillor for St Edmundsbury in Suffolk. But I also sit on the LGA's Rural Services Network, and I'm aware that we don't make full use of local government funding for sparsely populated areas. And we should make a case through Nick Bowles and the DCLG of delivering those services within sparsely populated, attractive rural areas. And I think there's a degree of funding that we should tap there from another source that recognises that delivery. And through the Minister, I would very much appreciate that joined up thinking between DEFRA, where we've had a commitment of funding, but also the DCLG that has that element to consider of a sparsity element in delivering services to all our residents in protected landscapes.
Really, you better come to that same meeting.
I'll move diary secretaries here. Any more on this before we move on? Last one from Colin, suppose I can see them.
Yeah, even if you manage to get the Minister to lobby local government, don't expect local government necessarily to listen. Government, a couple of years ago, reorganised housing benefits and started charging them locally. And they gave back to the local authority 90% of the money which they were otherwise would have spent on it. They come back to rate support grant. They expect the councils to pass that on to the parish councils. A lot this year decided not to. The Minister wrote strongly, very nice of him, to all councils saying, you should pass this on. Did they? My own didn't. But I do still manage to keep my parish council's contribution going to the AONB. And just to say, do you tap your parish councils? Because they do have some money. We're not capped by anything.
Certainly do.
Some will, and indeed some won't. I think it's largely a question of scale. I think in Arnside and Silverdale, you probably stand in Arnside at one point in Arnside and Silverdale and see the entire AONB. You only need David's helicopter and some to do that from the North Panel. I think several of others would too. I think sort of working according to our scales in that department. I'm going to move on with a question that's connected from Karuna Woodall.
I think a number of the... Thank you. I think a number of the issues I was going to ask have sort of come out in the questions so far, but my original question was related to the diversification of income streams. But I'm going to sort of revise it slightly to say that I think some AMBs now cut to the quick with maybe just a couple of members of staff, and we're all doing our best to explore different sources of revenue. And also national parks, our national park colleagues are also feeling the same squeeze and being encouraged to do the same thing. And I think Howard basically referred to the potential for a Scrabble for the same sort of limited pots of money. And I feel that there's that approach could ultimately sink an individual AMB if it wasn't successful, but may not have possibly the same impact that on a national park if that outcome was the same. And I feel that there are there's an increasing tendency to perhaps have these sort of challenge type funds. NIAs was one of them. Great if you're successful. It's a significant amount of input and resource if you're not. And I just sort of wondered whether the panel have any thoughts on how we can avoid that Scrabble and being collaborative, and whether there are other ways that we can influence some of the frameworks that we can obtain money so that we deploy that in the most effective way.
I'm going to put the pressure on you to define that question in a sentence.
Sorry, being half German, I can't help it.
I know that. I did know that, but I was trying to not go for gag, which is mature of me, I think.
I guess the question is, how can we avoid the Scrabble for the same limited pots of money?
Matt.
Okay. As I articulated to you earlier on, I spent 20 years working in the public sector, and I found sometimes it extraordinarily frustrating because I wasn't in control of my own destiny. What I find, and I worked for the City of London Corporation in Epping Forest, where I had more money to run 8,500 acres than we had for 2,500 square kilometres in Loch Lomond and the Trossard, and we had more staff. But I still wasn't in control of my own destiny. Money is not always that marvellous. I mean, we were it was just sort of silly amounts of money, and it was a unique experience, and it was not one I want to repeat. Despite the fact that Epping Forest is very beautiful, particularly when the Tour de France goes through it. Having a degree of control over your own financial destiny is one of the benefits of being in business. Is one of the things that I like. Is that I can go out and I work hard and find our clients and deliver the goods and get paid for it and build a pricing package that has a fair and reasonable return on it based on the risk that we're being asked to take, and sometimes the risks are quite huge. I detect in the room a certain sense of frustration in the fact that your funding streams are being changed and you feel pretty helpless about the amount of influence you can have over it. So the alternative to that is to use all those things we talked about, all my 5 USPs, or was it 7 or 9 or whatever it was, about agility and flexibility and trust and your lack of statutory purpose to your advantage. Use what you've got to go out and build your own funding stream. As quickly as possible, obviously, but as soon as you're in control of your own destiny, you'll find that life is a lot better. And you will feel less desperate. Yes, local government does need to contribute, and yes, social and central government does need to contribute, because these are incredibly important public goods that we are talking about. And my criticism or comment about councils earlier on, and it was me, not him, was not of councils, but it was to say that business likes the fact that AONBs are not perceived as councils. You're perceived as something different, and that's a real value add as far as you're concerned for the business sector. You can use that agility and that flexibility and that lack of statutory purpose to your advantage to drive some new funding streams. But you've got to be very entrepreneurial about it, and you've got to be prepared to take some risks, and you've got to get the backing of your governments to do that. And that's a hard ask, but we may be getting to a stage where actually that's the only ask you can make. And I think the future's very bright.
Move on. We have some quick responses on this if we could. We're running out of time.
Okay. Forgive me, because this is where the rotten fruit will come, but we just need to be grown up, and we need to be mature about that. It's still scraps of scraps at the end of the day. The pain, I accept the point, because it's been made to me very clearly, not here but on other occasions, that some of the AONBs are going through is horrific, but it's not unique to the AONBs. I know we're bigger in national park authorities. In 2011 we had 140 staff. But we made 40 of those redundant out of 140 because of the first tranche of cuts. That's 40 people's jobs, 40 people's lives. That hurts. That wasn't easy. Don't think that it's easier over the fence because the scale of the redundancies is bigger. It's not. But I really don't see the value in this cracking on at each other over that point. 3 things to do. 1, make the case to government about the importance of central funding for these areas. They matter. 2, make the case to public because they're more important than central government, because they decide who central government is and they listen. And 3, ultimately, we have to reduce our reliance on central government funding. It's not an option to do otherwise. We've got to look for other ways and means of raising our funding.
Good, brief, next option.
I agree with a lot of that. It's rather like our national museums. The government supports them to a great extent and they get free entry. It seems to me that's the basic minimum deal, and after that they've got to be more enterprising and find money. It's not as though we don't know how to find it, but when you're down to 2 staff, it's very hard choices about how much time and energy you put into that. The more you do that, the less you do of something else, something that matters. We're in that extraordinarily difficult position, and I think a bit of help would go a long way. I might go back to Corinna of all people about how do you avoid wasting those resources. I think the HLF got a good result by giving us very generous terms for development phase applications that avoided that waste of resources. But you still have to prove your worth, but once you got through that, there was a prize worth getting at the end of it.
And Steve's point shows the need for and power of the collective and of the family. You know, some of the family are very small and some are less so. The collective's important. Minister.
Well, first of all, I'm getting the message very loud and clear. Secondly, you've heard from me and from everyone else about looking for alternative sources of funding, and we all need to learn how to stand on our own feet. Thirdly, I do appreciate that you're very stretched on manpower. You can't do everything, so I think you have to prioritise. And fourthly, you have a national association who are there precisely to help pull together ideas, best practice, and those sorts of things.
Thank you. And really quickly, to pick up on Steve's point about the number of people working in A&Bs, there are 250 odd people out there. Add that to the park complement of 250 enthusiastic, skilled and energised people. Surely amongst ourselves we can come together and prioritise what we need to do at a national level with regards external grant application and approach the major funders. And I think, yes, we're doing it at a joined-up level at a regional or subnational level, but we should be able to do that. And we don't ever want to get into a situation where the designation has become more important than the landscape that it's meant to represent and protect.
Thank you. We're close to the end now. There's a question from Paul Jackson, which I think is aimed primarily at the Minister.
Yes, I think so principally, but taking the cue from I think something that David has said, my original question was we're obviously all aware of the work that DEF has been doing, has put into protecting our budgets, and we're obviously keen to help where we can with that. So, in that vein, is there anything more really that we could do to help this effort going forward? And maybe taking David's cue, I'd say sort of three key points in perhaps taking this forward, sort of in the short term.
I've referred several times to the work that I want to do to develop the compelling case, and for me it's a series of cases, as I say, an economic case that we can, each of us can take, you can take and tailor it to your individual circumstances, but broadly speaking, some really compelling economic arguments that you can make to LEPs, to businesses, and the commercial side of life. I think we need a compelling case in the health arena as well, because I think you're really important for the health of the nation, and I think we need to make those who have the funds on the health side, and there are substantial funds, understand that. And then biodiversity, that is an area we haven't actually spent an awful lot of time talking about the new environmental land management scheme, but that will offer opportunities not so much for core funding, but the way we envisage it working is that there will be funding for coordination of sort of nature improvement areas Mark II. So we get this idea of landscape scale approaches to biodiversity, and there will be some funding in there for coordination of those. And I think you, AONBs, are a very powerful potential coordinator for that.
Well, thank you. Jill has waved her, is it a magic wand or a watch at me? And that's just, I need to bring this together. It's clear that we have a friend in the Minister, which is tremendously valuable. I've met the Minister a few times recently, and it's very clear we've got someone who's in our corner. I'll finish with something David said before, so I apologise. What I don't want to do is, when I retire, have my kids say to me, how come all this countryside and wildlife declined on your watch, Dad? What the hell are you doing? And we hear a lot of doom and gloom, and we shouldn't focus on it. We focus on it too much. But say, well, you know, how come the nature conservation community is failing? Because everything's in decline. So if this were a football match, we'd be about 5-0 down. But we have actually played a blinder. Were it not for the national parks and the AONBs, and to a certain extent some of the other AONBs, we'd be 10-0 down. The good news is it's only half time. And what's necessary in the second half is playing together a lot better as a team between the AONBs and national parks, between us and government, between us and our councils, our public. And so here's to a second half where we do a Germany on Brazil and really pull it.